Hello, my name is JayMac and welcome back to Joyful Parents. Today I want to talk about winning the early battles. Now, what do I mean by winning the early battles? Well, I'll give you an example. Just the other day, I'm in Walmart and there's a lot of kids in Walmarts. They're in the carts with their parents and they're driving the parents crazy because they want this and they want that. And I always see the battle on the cereal aisle. This is where the ultimate battle of wits begins. And it's where the child is asking for the Lucky Charms or the Fruit Loops or, the cereal that is packed with sugar. And the parent's like, no, we're going to get this. It's healthier, whatever. And the battle begins. The child starts to escalate. The parent starts to escalate. It gets louder and louder. Pretty soon you have a child who's screaming. Then, I've been there, you have a parent who's absolutely embarrassed. And what do? So many times I have seen the parent, because they're embarrassed by their screaming child, they give in to that child. And I believe that is the worst thing that you can do. I believe that is the moment that the child suddenly takes superiority or strength or loses a level of respect for the parent. This is a battle that you must win, I believe. And there's a couple of ways to win it. The first is to tell the child, if you do not stop the tantrum, then we are going to go outside and we are going to sit in the car until you stop the tantrum. And you have to mean it. You have to believe it. And you should have, in my opinion, a rule that says you never, ever, 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 ever get what you want from a tantrum. If you allow tantrums to result in positive things, then do you think those tantrums are going to go away? They're not. And I just admit, this is so difficult. I can remember being in church and your child is acting up and they're starting to yell and they're starting to scream. And you're like, what on earth do we do? Well, we decided that one of us, my wife or I, pick the child up, first tell him, if you don't stop, we're going to have to go out in the foyer until you stop screaming. And so at some point, we'd pick him up, take him out into the foyer. And here's where I would see a lot of other parents who would have a screaming child in the church meeting, and they'd take him out in the foyer. And what did they do in the foyer? They let the kids run around in the foyer. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're letting the kid win. Of course the kid is going to throw a tantrum. He doesn't want to be forced to sit in church where he can't make noises, so you've rewarded him by taking him out into the foyer and let him run around. So we decided, no, we're not going to do that. We'd go out and we'd find a chair. Sometimes we'd even find an empty classroom. And we would sit there and we would make the child sit on our lap and they would continue to throw the tantrum. And we would say, we can go back in as soon as you stop the tantrum. And oftentimes it would take minutes. Sometimes it would take longer. And as a parent, you have to be very calm and you have to be very collected. But eventually, every time the child decided that it would be much better to be back in church where we were, where, we'd bring some toys, we'd bring some treats, whatever, to try and help them be quiet. They'd decide that is much better than being constrained on my dad's lap. And so eventually I'm like, hey, do you want to go back inside? And lo and behold, yes, they wanted to go back inside. So that became an early key for us, that you have to win the early battles. And we've found that if you win the early battles, that later on in life, that as they're teenagers, there's not such a tendency for them to want to combat you because you have earned, I don't know what you would call it, a measure of respect. I'll give you another example. I had a child. We were at the dinner table and things got a little heated between us. And at one point, this child slammed the silverware on the table and screamed and went running upstairs and slammed the bedroom door. And I looked at my wife and I said, that cannot be allowed. And she agreed with me. So I got up very calmly, walked up the stairs, opened her door, and I said, when we are in a conversation, you do not leave that conversation until we have decided that that conversation is over. And you will never slam your silverware and your plate on the table, and you will never run upstairs and slam the door again. And we brought her down and we finished the conversation. Now, was it the last time that she did that? I'm going to say no. You know, there's no thing that you can do one time and it solves the problem. But it was never as bad, and we were always able to hearken back to that moment. That was a battle that we won early on. And I'll be honest, with our teenagers, I don't remember being aggressively challenged by them. And I believe that that is a direct result of the fact that we laid the groundwork when they were young so that they knew and understood that tantrums never, ever get rewarded. That if you're ever going to get anything out of your parents, you have got to approach it in a different way. So that's kind of my rule and tip for the day. Win the early battles. A tantrum never, ever can be allowed to be successful. If you can fight those battles there, and I know it's so hard in the cereal aisle, I've been there, I continue to see it, but if you have to go out and sit in the car, go out and sit in the car. I promise you, if you can win these battles early, it will really help you in the long run. And I also want to remind you that I put all of these tips and ideas in a book that I wrote years ago. It's called Joyful Parents. I've now converted that into an online course. You can find it under online courses on my website at jaymcfarland.com. I hope you'll check it out. And I would love your comments about winning the early battles and the tantrums in the cereal aisle. And I would also really appreciate it if you like the content that I'm sharing. Take a minute and subscribe. Also hit that like button so that we can spread this content. I've got a lot more great ideas and tips and tricks coming to you. I also plan on bringing in a lot of other experts and interviewing them to help you fight this battle. I want to tell you, it is worth it and you can win. But one of the hardest things about parenting is that the victories come slowly. Sometimes they don't come until your kids are in their 20s. Almost their 30s, but there are ways to see progress, and I want to help you out along the way. And also, please know, I'm here to help you avoid so many of the mistakes that I made growing up and that I saw my parents make, and that I decided I'm never going to do that again.